Hello, everyone. Pastor Matt here. I'm going to do a juggling demonstration real quick. Now, didn't that just kind of scare you a little bit? Now, if I just said I was holding some objects going to juggle, and you just read that on paper, that wouldn't scare you at all. But when you see these shiny, metallic, sharp things, when you see a lighter, maybe I'd even throw in a hot cup of coffee into the juggling act. It's the specific details that come to life. Today, we're going to talk about a way of reading the Bible where you immerse yourself in the story and actually see, feel, taste, and touch with your senses to have a much more powerful experience. I'm Pastor Matt Anderson, and this is Worship Anywhere. Well, again, welcome to Worship Anywhere. Great to have you with us wherever you're watching from. We are thrilled to have you here and to be walking this journey with you. Follow the prompts at the bottom of your screen, download our app, or to text to get involved in a group, a virtual group, to give to support the production of media like this that reaches people everywhere and supports them in their journey. Or if you'd just like to let us know you're here as a first or second time viewer, we're so glad to be together today. Got a lot planned. I'm going to dive right in. But before I do, I also want to let you know about a new thing we're doing at Surprise called Surprise Covenant Partnership. Now, this is basically a pathway to belonging that allows people to understand what that two-way dynamic relationship can look like between a person and their church, and how you can understand the Surprise mission, vision, and values along with our governance structure in order to fully say, this is my church and I want to invest in its mission. And we will rely on that group as trusted advisors and kind of the core heartbeat that pulsates behind our vision. So we have that pathway laid out. And if you're interested, whether you're a local Bismarck-Mandan resident or if you'd like to partner with us from a distance, we'd love you to let us know that. We are walking our first wave of partners through a pilot program right now. And if you're interested in participating, you can certainly go to this webpage, surprisechurch.com/partners. Read about it, learn about it, and then let us know, and we will support you in that journey. It's a very exciting journey. Every partner gets their own sponsor, so that you always have that connection point at the church. You always know who to contact if you have a need for support, and it's our way of making sure that no one falls through the cracks once they decide to belong at Surprise. So we're excited about that opportunity as it's coming up. We are also in the midst of a series called Meet the Author. 99% of Christians never write, record, and share their faith story, and we want to change that one story at a time. So we have created a template to help you share your faith story. If you go to surprisechurch.com/worship anywhere, you can download that template and you can write the before, middle, and after part of your faith story and just start to learn and think through your story with Jesus as the hero. If you do that and you practice that and you write that and you talk about it, you're going to be able to encourage somebody in ways you never thought you could. And if you write that down or record it for future generations, your family will have a legacy. So don't miss this great opportunity. Last week, we continued to share this visual where every faith story sort of have a beginning, rebirth, middle, and an ending, or a multiplication kind of phase. But it's very cyclical. Sometimes I still feel like a beginner. Often I do. Sometimes I feel like I'm moving forward. Sometimes I feel like I'm having a new challenge. And so this isn't this clean, linear experience as much as a journey in which there's an evolution and challenges and setbacks along the way. And Jesus expects that we will have an experience like this. He's willing to walk with us and welcome us back whenever we fail. Today, we're going to talk about how to immerse ourselves in God's story as we learn how to craft our own stories with Jesus as the hero. We better do that by understand the superstructure, the super story that we find ourselves in. And so what we need to do is not just read the Bible like it's a dry museum piece, but to actually immerse ourselves in the story in order to gain the experience of what they were intended to offer us. And so the word immersion literally means to dip or plunge into something, to sink or submerge into something. And the goal here is to learn how to experience biblical stories from within, because they were written for people who didn't have screens, who just tell stories. That was the most engaging experience of someone's day if they were listening to a good story. Today, sometimes we neglect the power of a story. But what do most kids want at night? Still before bed. My kids always wanted a story, either read me a story or tell me a story. So we are hardwired to be a part of a story. We're going to continue from last week. We're in Exodus chapter 1. And we're going to continue in Exodus chapter 2. Last week, Moses, the baby, was put in the Nile River because Pharaoh said all the Hebrew babies needed to die if they were male. And he had been snatched up by Pharaoh's daughter, raised in Pharaoh's house, and sort of was raised to be a prince in Egypt, so to speak. And that's where we pick up today, when he starts to recognize kinship with slaves, the Hebrew Israelite slaves that are working in the fields around his palace. Exodus 2, picking up, it says, one day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. So he went out physically to immerse himself in their slave labor, and he watched them with his eyes. He heard the whips cracking. He felt the desert heat. He immersed himself in their suffering. He saw, another sense word, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people, emphasizing his own people twice in one sentence, 2 sentences. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Let's spend a moment there. Seriously. I mean, you can just read over that, blah, 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 words, but this is a pretty powerful scene that would push TV ratings to a higher level, right? He sees a slave being beaten, probably beaten to death nearly, so that he felt like he had to come and save him. He went and he beats the Israelite slave master to death, digs a hole in the sand, and buries the corpse. Let's spend some time there for a moment. Even if you want, close your eyes. What do you see as you watch this unfold? What do you hear as those beatings are happening, as he's digging? Is he crying? Is he breathing heavy? Is the sand hot? Is the wind blowing? What do you feel? Do you feel Moses' heart pounding? Do you taste sand blowing in the air? It's a powerful story, but when you put yourself in it, you start to feel what the characters were feeling, and you yourself are a part of the story. Let's continue. When Pharaoh heard this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian. Pharaoh is the king of the nation of Egypt, the superpower at the time. So Moses has to flee to Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs of water to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered the flock. So they're fighting over a well here. Obviously, in this part of the world, water is a sacred thing if you need to water yourself or your animals. And so these shepherds are coming and they're harassing these women because Jethro, the priest of Midian, only had daughters. And so they couldn't put up a fight against this group of male shepherds. So Moses comes to their aid. Now, do you see that heroic side of Moses? Do you notice Moses' tendency to defend and save, first with the Hebrew slave and now with these Midianite priests' daughters? As you read that, as you put yourself in that story and watch him now fighting off more people to save people, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? And does Moses kind of remind you of anyone? Does Moses remind you of maybe the God who made him? Take a look at this. Next verses. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. And their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. Like Moses, who saw and he felt pity, God heard their groaning. And he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. God is immersed in Israel's story and yours and mine. He hears our cries for help. He sees and feels our pain. And I love the verbs that are in this passage. God heard, remembered, looked, and was concerned. God felt concerned as he was immersed in the stories of their lives. He was concerned, as if there was a real relationship there. Skipping now to Exodus chapter 3, as the story continues, Moses is helping Jethro, the priest of Midian, doing some shepherding for his flocks. And he's, with the sheep in the hills. All of a sudden, verse 2, he notices something. There an angel of the Lord appeared in flames of fire from within a bush. Now, this is that burning bush that we often hear about when we think of Pharaoh or Moses' story. Moses saw that the bush was on fire. Though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. Evidently, fires were pretty common. Maybe brush fires were common, but usually it burned its way through things. And this bush just kept right on burning. So he was intrigued. He wanted a closer look. Verse 4, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. As Moses hides his face, what do you see? What do you hear in this story? What do you smell, taste, and feel? If you've ever been near a fire and you feel the heat, is Moses so close that he has to back up? It's just too hot. He's been asked to take off his shoes. What does the ground feel like? God says it's holy ground. Take your sandals off. He's burying his face in the sand or dirt because he's afraid to look at God. He feels God's power. He hears God's voice. What does God's voice sound like to you? I see a little bit of a deep-voiced baritone, but maybe you hear something else, some high-pitched, piercing sound. What do you hear as God's voice? I don't think there's meant to be a right or wrong answer. He probably doesn't have an English accent. Other than that, it's, fair game. What do you smell? Do you smell something burning? Or since it's not consuming it, does it not smell like fire? Is there smoke? Put yourself in that situation. Just let yourself be there. By the way, that's a form of prayer. I spent some time talking to our teenagers this week at Surprise Students, Surprise Teens, and talked about how putting yourself in a story like this is a form of prayer that you get credit for. Sometimes I feel guilty for not praying enough. This counts. Just spending time in God's stories is absolutely a beautiful way to pray. And it takes all the pressure off you and I from having to come up with the right words. Just sit there and look around. Be a passive observer, curious observer of God's word. What a cool way to pray. Exodus 3 continues, the Lord said, I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying because of their slave drivers. I am concerned about their suffering. Notice those verbs. I've seen, I've heard, I'm concerned. He's immersed in their story. So I have come down. I am now coming down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the promised land he promised to Abraham many, many generations ago. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. I love how God does this. It's a little bit of a 180. It says, I have come to rescue them. I'm sending you. And that's a reminder, though, when God rescues, he calls. When he saves you and I, he saves us for a purpose. He has a calling for us. And when he wants to save and reach others, he sends others to them. He works through people. And so he's not just going to do it out of thin air. He's going to use Moses. And this is what starts the tug-of-war. A tug-of-war is now going to ensue between the God who calls and the person who is being called not feeling worthy. Have you ever felt unworthy of the calling of being a student or a parent? Of being a Christian, of being whatever job you have, of being in charge of something? Have you ever not felt not worthy of even being alive, not worthy of someone's love and respect unless you prove yourself worthy? Have you ever felt unworthy? Moses does, and he's afraid. Let's immerse ourselves in this tug of war, and I want you to sense what he's feeling and how God is trying to engage that fear. He has 6 different objections. We're going to run through these really quick. He tries 6 different ways to get out of this calling that God has for him. Exodus 3, verse 11, Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go? Like, I am a no-namer. I am now a shepherd in the wilderness. I am not a king. I'm not an emissary from another foreign nation. I don't have an army. Who am I?" God's answer, "I will be with you." That's who you are. You find your identity in me, Moses. Whenever you feel unworthy, I want you to find your identity in God. I want you to remember that you may not have everything it takes to survive and thrive and change this world, but you're not here on your own. You're a part of God's family, and your identity comes from his love. Before you accomplish anything, "I will be with you," is his answer. Second objection. Moses is a tough guy to convince. He would have been tough to sell like doorway salesman stuff to, because he just has reservation after reservation. Verse 13, Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God answers, "I am who I am." This is what you are to say to the Israelites. "I am has sent me to you." God also said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, 'The God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you.'" He doesn't really give him a name, does he? The name of Jesus is not known yet. And so God gives them other titles in the meantime. And the name Yahweh is a play on the word be. And so "I am who I am," or "I will be who I will be," is ultimately summarized in the name given to God in the Old Testament, Yahweh. And it's just 4 Hebrew letters that they weren't allowed to pronounce. They said the word Adonai instead, which is kind of like Lord. But Yahweh, the one who is the name that he gave him. "Well, that's nice," Moses said, "but I'm not convinced yet." Fourth objection. What if they don't believe me or listen to me and say, "The Lord did not appear to you"? Then the Lord said to him, "What's that in your hand?" And then he gives him a staff that when he throws the staff down, it turns into a snake. He has him put his hand inside his cloak and pull it out, and it's leprous, like rotting off, and then he puts it back and it's healed. So he gives him not only he gives him signs and miraculous displays that he can share to add credibility to what he's saying. So what if they don't believe me? Well, here are a couple signs you can perform to them. Fifth objection. He ain't done yet. Moses said to the Lord, "I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, Moses? Mo? Quick question. Who gave human beings their mouths? Yeah, kind of me. I kind of made humans and your mouth. Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what you are to say. So Moses is asking the Creator a question as if he doesn't really have the power over his problem. And God asserts his dominance, asserts his power over everything. "I gave you your mouth. Don't come and tell me that it doesn't work. You may not be the best speaker. You may not be the best looking. You may not be the smartest. But again, I am the creator of the universe. And I don't doubt myself," right? Well, you think that would convince him, right? But no. His sixth and final objection is basically, "I don't want to do it." But Moses said, verse 13, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." Doesn't even argue anymore. I just don't want to do it. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. And at this point, aren't you and I just waiting for God to smite him? Like he's given him his chances. You've got the fire right there. He's standing in front of it. He hasn't consumed the bush or Moses. Moses is just whining his way out of God's calling for his life. It's time for the fire. Is it getting warmer? As you're sitting there with Moses, immersed in the story, is it getting a little warmer? I kind of feel that bush heating up as it says God's anger, the Lord's anger, Yahweh's anger burned against Moses. Do you feel that bush turning into like a supernova star as it's starting to die but exploding first? I expect the next thing to happen as I'm immersed in this story, as I'm sitting here chilling with Moses. I'm expecting some sort of fiery lightning bolt, maybe some liquid hot magma to just clump down on him, strike him dead, and Moses is gone. God moves over to somebody who's less cowardly, right? God's anger, Yahweh's anger, burned against Moses. And so what does he do? Let's find out. And the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? What about your brother Aaron the Levite? He ended up suggesting, in fact, he had already sent his brother to meet him. Moses is about to be met by Aaron. Aaron has been sent by God even before they had this conversation, as if God knew what his objections were. God says, Moses, Aaron is actually coming to you, Moses, and he's coming to meet you now, and he'll be glad to see you, and you can just tell him what you want to tell the Israelites, and then he'll speak for you. I just want us to notice here, as we're sitting in the story, that when we expected God to explode in anger, his anger prompted him to provide a supporter for Moses. Did you see that? God's anger has been totally and completely satisfied by Jesus Christ's death on the cross. God never gets angry at you to punish you. Whenever our activities spur God's disappointment, God provides forgiveness, mercy, and support. And in this case, and many cases in our lives, he provides others to support us. Here's a couple pictures of some community groups that met last week. As they jump into their new semester, they discuss these weekly messages. They laugh, they eat, they cry, they tell stories. And I want that for you. I want that because whenever you feel like you're a disappointment, just know that God wants to send support, not punishment. And the support that God sends you is exactly what you need. Sometimes we're not ready for support of people who are willing to say, hey, that doesn't seem right, or why are you doing that? But most of the time it's just affirmation, encouragement, and care. And so if you're still interested in jumping into our semester community groups, go ahead and text that number. Or if you're in person on Sunday, submit a handout. And whether you're at a distance and want to be a part of a virtual group, or open up your front door, open up your life to people around you, or you'd like to join one of our existing groups, we'd love to give you some information, because when God gets angry, he sends support and people. This week at Surprise, we're also going to hear in person on Sunday from Cindy Smith, who's a person who often cares for people at Surprise and loves people. And we're going to hear a little bit more about her faith story as becoming that support for other people and how that works. But I want to end with this. When Moses and Aaron, together with Aaron being Moses' mouthpiece, his spokesperson, when they go to Egypt and they go on this mission to first, they have to rally the Israelites behind them, the Hebrew slaves behind them, as to be their leaders. They can't speak on their behalf if they're not their leaders. So they have to win their affection first and then go to Pharaoh and announce, let my people go. And they do. They try. And it takes a while. But verse 30 in Exodus 4 is really powerful to me. Verse 30 and 31 say this: and Aaron told them everything that the Lord had said to Moses. And he also performed the signs before the people. And they believed. So they intellectually said, okay, these guys have God behind them. They're powerful. They believed. But they're not celebrating in worship. They're not bowing down to this God yet. Watch what happens next. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshiped. You see, it wasn't information that drew them to worship God. It wasn't even signs and miracles. Some people think if I just saw a miracle, I would believe and I'd be all in. That's almost never the case in the Bible. Jesus actually tried to avoid doing miracles for people because he said, all you care about is just seeing more magic tricks. It doesn't lead you to faith. It's when they heard that the God of the universe actually sees them, cares about them, is concerned for them, and wants to help them in their misery, that they get on their knees and they worship him. That is so important for you and I to remember. That God doesn't just want us to know and remember information. God doesn't just want us to see his power. more than anything, he wants us to know his heart. He wants us to know his love for us. And that's why on the cross, we see who God really is. See, if God wanted us to just be smart, he would have sent us a teacher. If he wanted us to just be blown away by magic tricks, he would have sent a magician or a miracle worker and nothing more. He sent a teacher. He sent a miracle worker. But the primary way that he became known to us, and the main reason we worship him, is because of what he did on the cross, where he saw our misery and was concerned and sacrificed his life for ours to win us back into God's family. So that when his anger burns, he sees his son suffering on our behalf and says, good enough. And then forgiveness and support and love are his mode with us. This week, I hope that you can immerse yourself in this and other stories in the Bible, not for information alone and not just to see power, signs, and wonders alone, but to see the heart of this God whose love is always greater than his anger and who wants you to walk with him and his people through life. Thanks for joining us for Worship Anywhere this week. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.
There is no fear.